Welcome to the Undiscovered Metric, the podcast where we interview industry leaders and explore how to measure what matters and stay ahead of the trends that shape marketing's future. I'm your host, Ira. I'm the marketing director here at Adverity, and we have the pleasure of talking to David von Hilchen, sales director for DACH in France at Stackadapt. Today, we'll be talking about scaling marketing efforts. David, welcome. Please feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Irina, thank you so much for welcoming me to your podcast here from Adverity. I'm David. I'm in the ad tech industry since 15 years. Since June of last year, I'm leading the German, or how we say, like DACH org of Stackadapt in the region. Stackadapt is a Canadian multi-channel DSP, and we're currently expanding globally at high pace.
So talking about scaling across multiple channels, and I'm pretty sure Stackadapt is one of the leaders in terms of talking about scalability, talking about applying different marketing techniques across media, across multiple channels. What's the most common pitfall that marketers are actually making, and how do you overcome it?
So, I'm looking at that always from a advertising perspective, of course, and the biggest issues we usually see with advertisers is when there's a misalignment in between the marketing goals and the KPI advertiser chooses to run their campaigns. And when this connection, or when this alignment in between KPIs and marketing objective is not clear, this has a negative effect on, for example, which channels should I choose in the first place, right? Of course, not every marketing or advertising channel performs for each and every KPI in the same way. And the sole selection of the right channels is a very important first step. And then, obviously, once we are at that point that we know, like, what is our overall goal, what kind of KPIs do we pick, what kind of metrics, which channels, what we also see on a regular basis is inconsistent messaging across different channels, which could be that, like, I have want to market a specific product, and there is one specific aspect of the product I want to bring into the world, a specific attribute, for example. Then this messaging for that attribute obviously needs to be consistent across all channels, that it really lands. What we see, if that's not the case, is usually that overall the quality of the outcomes is not really good. And to control the outcomes, obviously, you need a tool like Stackadapt, which is a multi-channel DSP, to integrate the data, to measure the data across these different channels. What we usually see is done not like in the perfect way, but we also have a couple of partners who do that perfectly fine. In a couple of my roles, I worked pan-European, or in some cases even globally. What I think needs to be true to be successful when you want to scale in different markets is like to get a market understanding, right? Like different markets have different cultural aspects, different nuances also to which kind of, again, back to the KPIs, which channels perform how on which KPIs, for example. And in the first step, obviously, as a marketeer, you may have to make yourself aware of these differences and nuances to be able to react to that. Coming back to the messages and the messaging of the campaign, this needs to be localized too, right? There can be local differences in like how people communicate in Austria versus Germany, even if like both countries would be German, or of course, how like cultural differences in between countries like Italy and Austria even bigger. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration for a successful outcome of the campaign in the end. When we get into channels where we have different kind of senses used, for example, CTV uses audio, visuals, and all of that obviously needs to come together, and also like how language is used. And again, language also as a cultural code in a way. This needs to align to what the market and the audience expects in these different markets.
Gotcha. And then let me make a very smooth slide into the topic of AI here, because the more I talk about language, the more I hear that AI can do all the translation and whatever. But let's take it one step further. AI talked about everywhere in any possible practical application, marketing, sales, business management, you name it. How is it shaping the scalability of marketing efforts today? Be that across channels, be that across geographies, across department, where do you see AI fit?
Look, I mean, how AI agents, how it's called, is implemented in the business world today, like, is so different in like different industries and categories. What I can say for marketing, obviously, in the first place, it makes people more efficient and effective while using automation. Today, me as an individual with the help of AI can probably do the work in the same time as a couple years ago, 2 to 3 people. We don't know. Probably in a couple of years, I, as an individual who is capable of like using AI, could do the work of like 5 to 10 people maybe, right? Like this has an effect on like my effectiveness and efficiency. And then if we take that to the technology level, I mean, platforms like Stackadapt, for example, use AI machine learning algorithms to increase and enhance targeting, for example. So that means also on an advertising level or a marketing level, AI and machine learning helps us drastically to improve the performance of our campaigns. And then on top of that, not only that, or part of like what is improving the performance is that I'm capable for the first time to personalize at scale, right? I can send a message or a different message to you, Irina, as like a woman in Austria, or me as a male human being in Germany sitting in Berlin versus Vienna. The AI can help us to build and draft the creative messaging, the creative itself, just in the second of the moment of like the ad is played out.
You mentioned campaign performance, and let me catch you on that. Successful campaign performance, of course, that's everything that we're looking for when we are marketers, when we're on the growth side, on the lead generation side. What do you think is that success factor in terms of integrating all the data together, be that within Stackadapt or be that Stackadapt combined with other data sources? How do I ensure correct data integration upon which I can later start scaling? Because my best understanding and my belief is that you cannot scale unless you already have a foundation in place, unless you already understand that this is trustworthy, this is reliable, this has high quality. What is your advice?
100%. Look, it all begins with like the basis of data you just mentioned, right? And this basis of data, or this database, needs to have a certain quality, right? And the better the seed quality of the data, so the cleaner, are there no duplications in the data, right? Like, is the basis like of high quality, then obviously in the end the outcome can be better. To make use of that data, and also you mentioned like different sources that data can come from, right? If I have like I don't know, an email marketing platform, for example, that stores part of my data, or on the other hand side, my sales team has a CRM tool where data is stored. In an ideal world, right, I can bring that data together in one platform and make use out of that and like collect the data at one spot, to also be able to use, again, AI, use machine learning to analyze the data and make sense of it, and draw the right conclusion of like the patterns I might be able to identify in the data.
And a little bit more around the data topic. So have you witnessed, be that within Stackadapt or be that within your clients, that collaboration between the data teams and the marketing teams, be those creative people or performance marketers? And if yes, where do you see the possibility to actually foster that alignment for future scaling of marketing efforts or for future scaling of data efforts? How do you ensure that data people understand what creative people want or marketing people want? Let's generalize a little bit.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, how do marketers understand that their efforts have to be or must be data-driven?
I think you can break that down to communication in the end, right? If like the communication is there in between creative team, for example, and a data team, consulting team, this is the first step to create an understanding on both sides of like what's important to them. And then give an understanding of like what are shared KPIs, what are goals both parties share. For example, we have a creative studio in-house, and we work very closely with our creative folks who help our partners create ads or creatives or adopt creatives for different channels, for example. What we usually use is like collaboration tools where we can like work on a project for a certain client together, where we can put feedback in. I think this is like super helpful. And then in the end, like what our creative team is doing really well is after a project is finished, check in like on the campaign, on the project again, to see what the performance looked like and what kind of learnings they can take from it to improve their work going forward, and for this particular client, but maybe also for other clients they're working on right now.
Stackadapt as a company offers lots of metrics, right? You offer a great foundation for reporting on the campaign performance, on the marketing channel performance. And in your opinion, what is that potentially overlooked metric that marketers should pay attention to?
I mean, usually the overlooked metrics are the ones that are not obvious and maybe not even available in Stackadapt in some instances. I think like the one metric I encounter more and more in the past, which is overlooked because it's hard to measure, is incrementality. Incremental reach, for example. Let's say I want to run a connected TV campaign, and to understand if I spend that amount of money in parallel to my linear TV campaign, how much incremental reach would that create? Stackadapt has tools for that. But then there are also like metrics like incremental ROAS. So if I spend a certain amount of money, how many conversions do I get that would not have happened without that spend? This is harder to measure. Solutions for that would be like geolift tests, for example. So these are metrics I think are extremely valuable and will become even more valuable in the world we're in right now, where cookie becomes less and less a factor in measuring advertising performance.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I think that was exactly on point, at least where I'm finding myself too, in terms of, measuring certain KPIs or tracking certain metrics on my side. Common mistakes. What are the common mistakes that you see marketers doing over and over again?
I just mentioned at the beginning, I think, and this is also what I challenge my teams on very often my teams are here to consult our partners. And what I usually ask them is really like, what are your partners' business objectives? How do they translate these business objectives into marketing objectives? What kind of KPIs do they draw out of that? And which metrics do they use to fulfill or like to reach these goals? And this is not only an exercise for my team. I think this is also an exercise every marketer has to go through. And very often I see that like the wrong, and we had that in the beginning of our conversation, right? Like that like wrong KPIs are chosen for specific marketing goals. To give you an example, probably every company in the world, most of them would say like one of their goals is growth. They want to grow as a company. And then obviously in their marketing objectives, how they translate that is they want to see a positive return on ad spend, positive ROAS, right? Which metrics do they choose in their campaigns? Last click performance.
Yeah, that's such a logical conclusion to make.
A logical conclusion, but in the end, if you look closer on like the KPI or the metric last click ROAS, this is overvaluing channels that are able to put an ad impression close to a conversion event. Let's say Google search is such a moment, right? If I know I want to buy white Adidas sneakers, for example, and they put that in my Google search, like I'm so close to buying that. If I see an ad for white Adidas sneakers in that moment because Adidas has booked that specific keyword, is that like incremental, back to incremental ROAS? Probably not. This conversion would have happened even without the ad, right? And this is not helping me as a company or a business grow my business. This is, in the end, you could say wasted money because this is not where you wanted to spend it, right? You want to grow and then you look for last click ROAS. But again, you overinvest in channels where the conversions are less likely to be incremental.
Right. But I think it's also great that we understand more and more of it, that marketers also tend to think about that last click attribution versus
100%.
first click attribution, and at least start understanding that ultimately they need that question to be answered. My final question, let's talk a little bit about inspiration. What are the go-to resources for marketing news and trends, sales news and trends? What are the go-to websites or media that you are looking at?
Great question. Before Stackadapt, I worked for Pinterest, the company that like has in its mission to be tries to inspire people. So like inspiration was a big topic for me in my career. But in general, I mean, honestly, where I draw the most inspiration from is the people around me. It's my team. The team at Stackadapt is amazing in like sharing. So we have a culture of sharing. So I get a lot of like news of the industry that are most relevant to me from my team. But then on top of that, if I want to make my research, obviously I use the regular tools like Statista and eMarketer to learn more about the markets. And then also peer insights. Obviously, there are some individuals on LinkedIn I follow, I think, hold great insight or come back on a regular basis. Very reliable with like good insights. One is like Ben Dutter, who's the chief strategy officer from Power Digital. He has great insights, especially on the topic of incrementality. Great guy. Then in Germany, there's a friend of mine, Daniel Diestler, who has his own marketing podcast called Marketing Pioneers. And then obviously Adverity has a great podcast too I'm listening to.
Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest here. And thanks a lot for the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much.